If that headline sounds explosive, that is because it is supposed to. But what makes this moment so revealing is not just the idea that Camilla has somehow been removed overnight. The real story is bigger than that. It is about who truly belongs at the center of the monarchy when the cameras move, when the tone changes, and when the future of the crown starts being shaped in plain sight. Because in royal life, removal does not always look like a slammed door. Sometimes it looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like absence. Sometimes it looks like a prince making it quietly clear that the next era will not be built around the same people who mattered in the last one. And that is why this has landed so hard. If you enjoy these deep royal breakdowns, make sure you stay with me all the way through, because this one is not really about one dramatic moment. It is about what that moment appears to confirm. On the surface, people heard that Prince William had finally signaled the end of Camilla's central place in the royal family, and the reaction was immediate. Shock, anger, satisfaction, disbelief. But when you strip away the noise, what you are left with is something even more interesting. Not a family argument in the simple sense. Not a random cold gesture. Not even just a personal rejection. What you are looking at is a quiet power shift. And those are the moments that matter most in a monarchy. The loud scandals grab headlines, the quiet reordering of importance changes history. That is what makes this feel so much bigger than gossip, because Camilla's story inside the monarchy has always been complicated. She was never just another royal spouse. She entered one of the most emotionally charged spaces in modern British royal life, carrying years of public baggage, years of comparison, and years of resistance from people who never fully accepted the journey that brought her into the palace at all. Over time, she built a role. She worked, she steadied herself, she adapted, and eventually, under King Charles, she became part of the official structure of the institution, not just the emotional controversy around it. But here is the thing. Being accepted into the structure is not the same as being rooted in the bloodline. And in this family, that difference matters more than almost anything. That is the part people do not always say out loud, because it sounds harsh. Yet the monarchy is built on exactly that kind of harshness. It can smile for the balcony. It can stage warmth for Christmas walks. It can present unity at funerals and pageants and jubilees. But underneath all of it, this is still a system obsessed with rank, continuity, inheritance, and legitimacy. It is about who carries the line forward and who is attached to it by marriage, duty, service, or circumstance. Those distinctions may feel old-fashioned to the outside world, but inside royal symbolism, they are everything. So when William appears to send a message about Camilla's place, people are not reacting to a simple personality clash. They are reacting to what that message suggests about the shape of the monarchy after Charles. And that is where this gets interesting, because Prince William is not just Charles's son. In this story, he represents the coming correction. He is the direct heir, the future king, the figure many people already read as the bridge into the next phase. But emotionally, he is something more than that. He is also the son of Diana, and whether the palace likes it or not, that matters. Deeply, symbolically, permanently. William carries two burdens at once. He must protect the institution, and he must do so while existing as the living reminder of one of the institution's most painful emotional failures. That dual role has followed him his entire adult life. He is the heir, yes, but he is also the child through whom the public still processes old wounds. He cannot erase that, and he does not need to. In some ways, his power comes from understanding exactly how much that memory still shapes public feeling. So when people hear that he has confirmed Camilla's removal, what they really hear is something else. They hear the future king drawing a line between the Charles-Camilla era and the William era. They hear him signaling that whatever accommodations were made under his father's reign may not define his own. They hear him saying, in the language of monarchy, that centrality is not permanent just because visibility once was. That is why it stings. Camilla may have risen into the institution, but William was born into its center. That is not a cruel opinion. That is the structural truth of royal life. And structure wins. It always does. Now, to be fair, none of this means there has to be some dramatic private showdown with doors slamming and voices raised. Royal power rarely works like that in public-facing moments. It is much subtler. A role changes. A presence fades. Invitations shift. Priorities are rearranged. The emotional temperature cools. A person who once felt unavoidable starts to feel peripheral. And when that happens in ordinary families, it hurts. When it happens in the royal family, it becomes a message. Because this institution speaks in symbols. And symbols are rarely accidental. Think about what Camilla represented during Charles's long wait for the throne. She was not just a wife standing beside him. She was his chosen companion after decades of difficulty, scrutiny, and personal history. Her presence helped stabilize his private world. In the public realm, she came to symbolize his persistence. He had waited, defended, endured, and eventually the institution made space for her. That was the bargain. That was the adjustment. That was the late-stage rewriting of a once impossible story. But here is the problem. What is central to Charles personally is not automatically central to William institutionally. That distinction changes everything. William's priorities have always looked narrower, more controlled, more future-focused. He and Catherine project something very deliberate: streamlined monarchy, disciplined image, direct line, fewer distractions, less emotional clutter around the core. Whether people love that approach or find it chilly, it has a logic. It says the next era will be about clarity, about who matters to the institution, about reducing the number of floating centers of influence, about stripping the monarchy back to the essential figures who can carry public trust. And in that model, where exactly does Camilla fit? That is the question beneath the headline. Not whether she is technically family, not whether she has a title, not whether she once stood beside a king, but whether she belongs in the emotional and symbolic center of the future monarchy, once William's instincts, not Charles's, define the atmosphere. And the answer many people think they just heard is no. That is a very different kind of removal. It is not legal, it is not theatrical, it is not some official expulsion from a family tree. It is something much more royal than that. It is the stripping away of relevance, and that is far more brutal. Because in public life, especially royal life, irrelevance is the coldest punishment of all. A scandal at least admits your power. A fight at least proves your presence. But being quietly moved out of the core says something else. You are no longer essential to what comes next. That is where the emotional charge comes from. Camilla's defenders will say, and not without reason, that she worked for her place, that she carried out duties, that she survived years of criticism and rebuilt her public role carefully, that she stood by Charles and helped him. All of that is true in the broad sense of how her royal life developed. But again, the real issue is not effort. Monarchy is not a system that rewards effort the way normal life does. It rewards position. It protects bloodline. It preserves symbolism. And when the future king begins defining the next chapter, sentiment often loses to structure. That may sound unfair. It probably is unfair, but the monarchy was never designed to be fair. It was designed to continue. And continuation always forces hard distinctions about who is truly inside the center and who only held space there for a certain reign. That is why William's role matters so much here. He is not just another family member with an opinion. He is the future of the institution. His posture becomes policy long before it becomes official. His emotional distance becomes public reading. His choices, even when understated, become signals. And people around the palace understand that better than anyone. So if William appears to be repositioning Camilla, then the message is not just personal, it is strategic. That is where this stops being a family moment and starts looking like monarchy management. And let's talk about the deeper family tension here, because that cannot be separated from the symbolism. No matter how polished public appearances may be, William's life was shaped by the collapse of his parents' marriage and the pain surrounding it. People do not just forget that because time has passed and titles have changed. He may have learned how to operate within royal discipline, but emotional memory does not disappear just because protocol demands calm faces. It settles, it hardens, it becomes part of how a person sees loyalty, betrayal, image, and consequence. So even if William never says certain things directly, the public often reads him through that lens. The son who watched, the heir who remembers, the future king who understands that what a monarchy tolerates privately can damage it publicly for decades. That is why even small signals around Camilla are magnified. Because they are never just about today. They are about the old wound that never fully left the family story. Now add Catherine to the picture, and you begin to see why the center of gravity feels like it has shifted even more. Catherine is not just William's wife. In the emotional ecosystem of the modern monarchy, she represents stability, continuity, controlled warmth, and protective motherhood. She is not an accidental figure. She is the carefully grounded future queen, the woman through whom the royal line now looks emotionally safe, visually coherent, and publicly modern without feeling rebellious. That matters a lot, because once Catherine became that central, everyone else around the future monarchy had to be understood in relation to that core, not beside it as equals, in relation to it. And Camilla, for all her seniority in Charles's reign, does not symbolize the future in the same way. She symbolizes a chapter the monarchy managed. Catherine symbolizes a chapter it wants to sell. That contrast is powerful. One woman represents a hard-won settlement with the past. The other represents the carefully protected promise of the future. And if William is choosing which emotional architecture defines his reign, the answer seems obvious. This is why people who reduce all of this to simple dislike miss the bigger picture. Personal feeling may be part of it, yes, but royal decisions are never only emotional. They are filtered through optics, continuity, public trust, generational change, and institutional survival. The palace is always asking a hidden question: who helps steady the story we need to tell next? That is the story William seems to be answering. And his answer appears to be ruthless in its clarity. The future story is not about expanding the center. It is about narrowing it, tightening it, cleaning up its lines, making the direct heir's household the obvious beating heart of the institution. That means William, Catherine, and the children become not just important figures, but the central emotional brand of the monarchy. Everything else becomes secondary, respectable perhaps, acknowledged perhaps, but secondary. And secondary status can feel like exile when you once stood much closer to the throne. That is the hidden sting here, because Camilla's rise was always tied to Charles. Her legitimacy in the public eye was managed through his status, his protection, his determination, and eventually his kingship. But what happens when the monarchy begins to pivot away from Charles's emotional universe and toward William's strategic one? The answer is that relationships once shielded by one reign can become exposed in the next. That exposure is uncomfortable. It invites a brutal question. Without Charles at the center, what exactly remains of Camilla's centrality? Title, yes. History, yes. Recognition, yes. But influence, priority, emotional standing in the future narrative, those things are not inherited the same way. They can fade, fast. And that is why the idea of her being removed hits differently than a normal royal rumor. It plays into a much older anxiety about belonging, about whether someone who entered through marriage and controversy can ever really be permanent in a family whose deepest instinct is to close ranks around blood, heirs, and succession. That anxiety never fully went away. It was simply managed while Charles needed it managed. But William may not need to manage it in the same way. And that is why this feels like a quiet verdict. Not a verdict on Camilla as a person, not even necessarily a moral verdict, but a verdict on her future relevance to the core identity of the monarchy once the next reign takes shape. That is a hard thing to watch if you support her. And it is a deeply satisfying thing to watch if you believe the royal family is finally recentering itself around Diana's line. Either way, it carries emotional charge because it touches legitimacy, memory, and inheritance all at once. And here is the part people should not ignore. William does not even have to be dramatic for this to work. In fact, the less dramatic he is, the stronger the message becomes. Because calm distance in royal life often means certainty. It means the decision has already been made internally. The shouting stage is over. The performance stage is over. What remains is simple positioning. Who stands where? Who appears with whom? Who matters in the next frame? Who does not? That is how monarchy reveals itself. Not always through speeches, but through patterns. And once people think they have spotted a pattern, the atmosphere changes immediately. Every absence becomes loaded. Every appearance gets decoded. Every gesture starts carrying meaning. That is why this story has exploded. Because whether or not people agree on every detail, they sense a larger truth in it. The era of inherited accommodation may be ending, and the era of direct line control may already be beginning. That should not surprise anyone. William has spent years looking like someone preparing not just to inherit a title, but to reshape an institution. He understands image, he understands pressure, he understands that public patience with royal complexity is limited. And he likely knows that the safest future monarchy is one where the line of significance is visually and emotionally unmistakable. That means fewer blurred loyalties, fewer complicated centers, fewer figures who belong because of the past rather than the future. And that is exactly why Camilla's position feels so exposed, because she belongs to a settlement. William belongs to the succession. One is negotiable in public feeling, the other is not. So no, the real issue is not whether Camilla was removed in some dramatic movie scene sense. The real issue is that William may have just confirmed something many people already suspected. When he thinks about the monarchy he wants to lead, Camilla is not part of its inner emotional blueprint. She may remain respected, she may remain acknowledged, she may remain present in formal ways. But present is not the same as central, and central is what this family has always fought over in one form or another. That battle never really ends. It only changes clothes. Today, it looks like a headline about Camilla. Tomorrow, it may look like another carefully managed appearance, another strategic absence, another reminder that the future of the crown is not just about who is still standing, but about who still matters when the institution starts telling its next story. And that is why this moment feels so unsettling, because it suggests that a line has been drawn without needing to be shouted, that the family tension may have gone quieter, not softer, that the monarchy is moving into a stage where symbolism will do the work that confrontation does not need to. And in a royal world built on status, memory, and hierarchy, that kind of silence can say more than any official statement ever could. So now, I want to know what you think. Is this really William making a clear break with the Charles and Camilla era, Or are people reading too much into a shift that was always going to happen as the future king takes center stage? Because one way or another, this does not feel like a small moment. It feels like the kind of moment that exposes what the royal family still cannot fully hide, and what the future of the monarchy may already be trying to leave behind.